Hey everybody, welcome to the Blendr Report, where news meets rational thinking. I'm your host, Jonathan Harvey. This is your co-host, Liam DeBoer. Liam, what's up?
Not too much, brother. Today we're going to be chatting about Canadian universities having anti-Israel encampments spawn on them, British Columbia reversing decriminalization of public drug use following outcry from the public, Global Affairs audit finding that 26% of federal contracts failed to comply with regulations, BC Conservatives putting forward a bill for women-only sports only to have it defeated by the governing NDP, does the empire of the Western world need to fall, and Pierre Poilievre being booted from the House of Commons for calling Trudeau a quote-unquote wacko prime minister. However, if before we get into things you wouldn't mind leaving us a kind review on Spotify or subscribing to our YouTube channel wherever you're watching, that would be greatly appreciated. All right, let's get into it. All right, so first off, we've got Canadian universities spawning anti-Israel encampments. So as protests against Israel spread across U.S. campuses, Canadian universities are taking steps to prevent similar protests. However, it may already be too late. So on Saturday afternoon, McGill University saw the emergence of Canada's first anti-Israel encampment, with over 100 students pitching tents and forming a circle on campus. Their banners declared slogans like Intifada until victory, urging the university to sever ties with Israel. They praised Hamas's actions on October 7th as efforts for Palestinian liberation and demanded the release of a convicted terrorist despite the university's rules against such encampments. Officials have noted that many protesters aren't actually from McGill. Similar things happened at University British of Columbia, University of Toronto, and University of Ottawa, with the schools saying that they will not tolerate these encampments and are telling students to avoid them at all cost. So are these grassroots protests, or is the West under attack?
It looks pretty clear to me that the West is under attack. You know, like you'd mentioned, McGill University noted that a lot of these protesters aren't even students. So it seems clear, right, that they're being infiltrated. And sort of further to that point, the guys from Trigonometry, you remember the names? I never do.
Constantine and Francis.
Yeah. They did that interview actually at some pro-Palestinian protests over in the UK. And what was interesting is that they would interview these kids, and they were all like kind-hearted, decent people. There's nothing wrong with the individuals, but they were kind of asked like, hey, do you know what you're supporting? And they're like, oh, yeah, we're supporting Palestine. Okay, but you're holding a sign that says Intifada. Do you know what that means? No one had any idea. Or they misrepresented what it meant, you know? And then this other sign was from the river to the sea. And he goes, again, do you guys know what this means? And the guy's like, yeah, it means there should be a two-state solution. It's like, actually, it means they want to wipe out all the Jews and take the land. And what was interesting is that these people had no idea what they were actually saying or doing with this. So it's one thing to say, hey, we want peace. It's idealistic, but you and I still want peace. That would be great. But holding up these signs and sort of supporting basically genocide on the other side, that's your goal here. I think it's fair to say that these kids have no real idea what they're supporting, and that it's definite that the West has been infiltrated here. I mean, the silver lining to me is something we've talked about before. Is I believe this is the breakup. Whatever's happening here, whether it's infiltration or whether it's idealism or just momentum. The positive here is there's going to be a breakup between college kids and the government. And so for decades, there always was a strong divide. Kids were idealistic, government implements policy, students kind of keep them in check. At least they're the loudest group. But over the last almost 10 years, they've been in lockstep, right? And that's really bad for citizens because they were weaponizing these kids, which were once keeping the government in check, to then sort of push forward these very, very liberal policies, which are more Marxist, which you and I talk about all the time. So the positive thing here is that the weapon, which are these college kids, has become uncontrollable to the political elites. So now there's going to be this divide once again, and we're going to kind of see like the natural order restored, you know?
I mean, to your point about these people saying slogans that they don't understand, I actually went deep into the root of the word slogan, and it actually goes back essentially the word means battle cry. And then also there's another interpretation that means something along the lines of like the words of the dead, and it means that these slogans are overtaking your mind, that essentially you become a zombie and you're irrational. You're not actually thinking at this moment. these are just they're more feelings than anything that go on. But then people adopt these slogans that have real meaning and real implications, like intifada, which is a Arabic term for uprising or rebellion, violently so, by the way. And then so it's like, okay, I'm calling for. You can't say that you're sitting here calling for peace in the Middle East while you're simultaneously calling for violent revolution.
Exactly.
What are we doing?
Exactly.
And this is just a great example of Orwellian doublethink, and something that I was seeing as well when it comes to Colombia. What was really interesting is if you look at the early encampments, obviously now it's kind of grown and it's snowballed a little bit, but over the first couple days, all of the tents were the exact same and brand new.
Right.
And that immediately in my mind went like, who is providing all of this equipment and essentially these encampment supplies to these students? There's got to be some sort of organization there.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it was the exact same thing with the guys in the UK. All the signs these kids had, they literally said, "Oh, someone just over there just handed them to me."
Yeah.
They just line up and grab their sign and they go about their business. So yeah, it's this is organized for sure.
And then so there is a lady that is going viral right now on Twitter for a just insane proposition when she was talking to the press about this encampment at Columbia. So her name is Johanna King Slutsky. That's a legitimate name. So she is a paid instructor and PhD candidate at Columbia, studying, quote, theories of the imagination in poetry as interpreted through a Marxist lens.
Sorry, that's an education?
Yep. Yeah. So and these are these are the people that want you to pay their student loans.
Of course,
too.
yeah.
So I'm going to go study
go.
Marxist poetry, get myself into tens of thousands of dollars of debt, and then I'm going to try to enforce you to pay for my degree that has zero practical use in the real world.
Who's the blame here, though? The student or the educational system for providing this education?
And the banking system, because if you
for funding it, absolutely. Like what are you doing?
Yeah.
Show me the asset here.
100%. If I want to go in and get a business loan, I have to give you a business plan and show you how I plan on repaying this, when I will, and that kind of stuff. So why aren't these students having, when they get their student loans, why don't they have to have some sort of way of paying it back? Like, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to pay back your tuition from Marxist poetry.
You're actually working against the system of capitalism by getting this education.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
So just listen to how insane. So keep in mind, these are the ringleaders of the protest. So yes, a lot of the students might not know what they're doing, and they're kind of just getting involved in group.
Boy wearing a belly top?
Yeah. Yes.
Hey, it takes a lot of confidence as a man to wear a belly top. Yeah. Credit where credit's due, my dude.
And they're also wearing, for anybody just watching, they're also wearing the scarves of Islamic jihads. So anyways, this is insanity.
Why should the university be obligated to provide food to people who've taken over a building?
Well, first of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who pay for a meal plan here.
But you mentioned that there was a request that food and water be brought in, unless I misunderstood.
To allow it to be brought in. I mean, well, I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students. Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic, I mean, it's crazy to say because we're on an Ivy League campus, but this is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water?
Humanitarian
but they did put themselves in that...
You're not locked on the campus.
Deliberately in that situation and in that position. So it seems like you're sort of saying, we want to be revolutionaries, we want to take over this building, now would you please bring us food and water? And
nobody's asking them to bring anything. We're asking them to not violently stop us from bringing in basic humanitarian aid.
They're stopping the delivery of food?
We are looking for a commitment from them that they will not stop it violently.
So nothing's even happened.
No. Yeah. So,
oh my God.
So just Utter madness. So, okay, we are going to take over and occupy the school, and then you guys also have to provide us the food and supplies for doing so. Otherwise, you are being violent towards us. What?
Oh, every generation has their bridge to cross. This one's his mental health.
Yeah.
This is wild.
Yeah. It's pure delusion. And
That's what I mean. It's you're disconnected with reality. So the way I see the world is the day that you realize you are responsible for your life is the day things get better. And that can be tough. There's a moment of reckoning where you have to identify that you are responsible for maybe all the bad things that have happened to you in life. That can be a tough time. But the positive is now you have the power to go change everything. But these people, like, this is the time in your life when you're supposed to be realizing these things. And instead they live in the land of make-believe bullshit. This is insane. I don't know, man. It's going to be very interesting to watch this generation, work their way through their 30s and 40s and 50s and try to run this country and run this world, because they're an absolute disaster.
It's going to be terrifying. I don't know how interesting, but
there's the optimist in me.
Yeah. But this, I do want to really hammer in on this point too. These people that, yes, okay, there is a large portion of people that, yes, are just supporting this, and they don't really know what they're supporting. It's just their friends are doing something and whatever. But the ringleaders, the thought leaders in these circles are undoubtedly all Marxists and communists. And the reason being is that if you look across all of these social protests right now, whether it be gender ideology, whether it be the Palestine stuff, whether it be men versus women and feminism or Black Lives Matter, all of this, first of all, they all use the exact same Marxist symbology, the fists and such.
You know what's weird? I kind of want to point out, and maybe you could shine some light on this. I do agree with the fist that you're seeing all the time, and I understand the symbolism. Why is Trump doing it? Trump, that's his thing right now. He's been doing it the last year or two.
Really?
Oh, yeah, 100%. This is where his thing all the time.
Huh.
Always. And I found it so weird because, it seemed like this weird correlation to the left and this kind of Marxist ideology, but that's been his thing. And maybe he just doesn't understand, or maybe he's trying to take it back. I don't know. But I did kind of think it was weird.
I wonder if he's doing it consciously or whether he's just...
I think so. I think so because it is not once or twice. It is all the time.
Huh.
Gary Vee does the 5 thing.
Yeah.
So Gary Vee does that. I think it was because of the 5 books he wrote or something like that. I think there was a story behind it. There was a reason. You know what I mean? Trump does it all the time. So there is purpose behind it.
Interesting. I'll have to dig into that, because for anybody that's kind of wondering here, like, so for instance, there's that common uprising symbology of, yes, a fist pushing back against tyranny, and it's supposed to be a symbolized unity against oppression. And it was largely popularized by the communists and the Marxists. It was essentially the fundamental symbol of their propaganda. And actually what's interesting is the Nazi salute, the Roman salute, was used as a propaganda counter to that. That's where the fascists came up with the Roman salute. They were like, well, we need our thing.
Jesus.
And so to me, like, I look at these symbols like, okay, if we saw a crowd of people sitting around all doing the Roman salute, the Nazi salute, everybody would be like, oh my God, these people are dangerous and radical. Like, they're definitely harboring some crazy ideas. But then when it comes to Marxist symbology and propaganda, like, I'll show you a video here. This is in Oakville. So it is a kid holding a
sign. Not Russian. That's the old yeah.
So it's the hammer and sickle.
Yeah.
It's the symbol for communism.
Intifada until victory. One solution, revolution.
Intifada till victory. One solution, revolution.
That kid has no idea what he's saying.
No.
Just in case no one's watching this, that's a 21-year-old white kid who has got no idea what real struggle is whatsoever. And if you don't know where Oakville is, it's just down the road from here, and everyone there does quite well for themselves.
Yeah.
So that's just some kid trying to find his way.
Exactly. And so these people, they are just trying to find their way, and they're lost. I don't even know if they're trying to do anything. They're just utterly lost.
They're working their way through life. Look, when you go through college, there's this period where no matter what, you turn into a bit of a socialist because A, you're struggling, but B, you kind of are idealistic and want everybody to do okay. You're just breaching into adulthood, and you don't realize how adults actually treat each other and what the real world is like. And that's why you're kind of in that space. But it's like this tunnel you have to go through to come out on the other side. they're just in it, you know?
Yeah, I know what you mean when it comes to that kind of like, it goes back to that old saying where if you're not a liberal when you're young, you don't have a heart, and if you're not a conservative when you're older, you don't have a mind, whatever, that kind of saying. But I think this is another level than just kind of like, you look at, say, for instance, the hippies or the libertarians or the, we want everybody to be peace and loving and we want to heal society from the 1970s. They were very non-violent people most of the time. Obviously, some of the stuff you can point to got a little out of hand, but most of the time that was their messaging. But now it is just actually completely revolutionized radicalism of, we want to overthrow the West. So even what you've been seeing on some of these American campuses is saying that for Palestine to be free, they need to bring death to America.
I agree that this is definitely a radical version of the 70s hippie movement, like on steroids for sure. But again, I think it's my opinion that obviously I do believe that they've been infiltrated by a group from Palestine or the East for sure. I do believe that. I think that's what's mobilizing this. But I'm willing to bet 80% or more of these kids are just going through that tunnel, and this is what's got momentum right now. So they're jumping on the bandwagon. These kids are too young to have any real feelings about what's happening in the Middle East. They don't understand it, most of them, right? And they also don't understand life well enough to realize what they're even saying or doing. So again, I'm of the opinion that they're just on this moving train. Most of them. I don't give them, like, I don't condone it. That doesn't make it okay, but I do understand it, and that's the way I see it for the most part.
I can very much agree with you that from an understanding perspective, I see why they are this way, and I see why they're doing the things they're doing or taking up the views that they take up. But a lot of people think of like evil as this thing that is very consciously enacted, but really all of the worst atrocities have been ignorant people holding views very strongly and enforcing that on other people and willing to do those things through violence. And that's exactly what we're seeing here.
Do you think a lot of these kids are being violent? Because I'm not seeing a lot of violence. I'm seeing calls for violence. I'm seeing a misunderstanding of what they're actually representing, for sure. But I'm not seeing a lot of actual violence here on the ground. I'm seeing kids getting dragged out by police. Like the other day I saw it was in Colombia. They've started suspending and now expelling students for this. Which I get, I understand, given what's going on. But like what you see is some like typical looking liberal kid basically going limp body and being dragged out by 4 cops and whining and crying like a little bitch. That's what I'm seeing more than anything. Sure, you're having these moments where there is some violence, and again, I don't support any of it, but do you really think a lot of it is violent?
Yeah, desecration of property is a form of violence for sure.
How much property desecration is there? I've seen a bit, but I've seen. I also think the media. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to downplay it, but I do think the media highlights these things every time it happens to sort of exacerbate it a little bit, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, and this is my thing, is that there's a very select few people that probably are violent on a date. Like, I mean, I've even thrown this statistic out before, right? 60% of violent crimes are committed by 1% of the population.
Right.
So that's how it always goes. And then, but what ends up happening is, if that mob doesn't push back against that small amount of people that are violent, like let's say trashing property, and also what we've seen on all of these university campuses is them blocking Jewish students out by force.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
again, just to be clear, I don't support any of this.
Yeah,
I think it's wildly off base. Yeah. But I'm trying to understand how much of this is intentional, how much of this is infiltration, and how much of this is just children growing up and finding their way through this tunnel. I'm just trying to figure that out.
For sure. Well, and yeah, to that point, so property desecration, then also the locking of Jewish students out of allowing them onto campus. And then there was actually, I can't remember which one it was, whether it was down in Texas or whether it was at Columbia, but there was a Jewish student that was beaten unconscious.
Right.
So these things are happening, and the point I'm trying to make is that it's not widespread yet, but like we know with mob violence, dude, all it takes is like, the bomb is there. The bomb is already live. It's already created. All it takes is for that fuse to go off.
See, I'm of the opinion that you're off base a little bit, that this is going to escalate because school just ended.
Yeah.
All this is happening on college campuses right now, and it's all the idealistic kids, but the large majority of students, schools wrapped up, both in the United States and Canada, which I know is, but you got to think about what is the catalyst, or what allows this to happen. And again, you think about mob mentality. Well, mob only happens when people are together. But when you go to school, and then school's over, you disperse and you all go to your hometowns and you go enjoy your summer. You drink, you try to have sex, you have fun. You don't worry about it. Maybe play a little golf. I don't know. But the thing is, you don't maintain this mob mentality if you're not in this location that kind of fosters or harbors it, right? So I'm hopefully of the opinion that this will probably cool down pretty quick once these encampments end.
I mean, I hope so, but I think what you're going to see is end up being a kind of pushback, like I mean, what we've already seen is when these cops come in to break up these encampments, it does get pretty violent. Hell, the police force in Texas was pepper spraying the crowd.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, like
yeah.
heavily.
Yeah. I saw it, but you know what though? Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna stay out of that. Yeah, I saw it.
But this is, so I'm not saying whether it will or it won't happen, but what I'm just looking at is just going, it's primed, and the chance for it happening is there. And so whether it will or won't, who knows? We'll see how things unfold. I hope it doesn't, because these things, if they continue to escalate, we could be looking at the stage is set for something very similar to BLM to happen, where all of a sudden it could leak out into cities and you start having rioting and looting.
I don't think people are. Yeah, you could see a bad couple of instances like that. I don't want to downplay that, but the thing is, with BLM, people are black, so it's easy for them because it's part of who they are. They'll go support it. But there's actually not that many people that have a horse in this race. I think a lot of it is idealism, to be quite honest with you. There's 15 million Palestinians approximately. I don't think that many are dispersed into these crowds. So again, when push comes to shove, and when you don't have your mob around you, and when the consequences are very, very real, if you go do something like that, I think a lot of those people are going to back down because they don't quite have enough of a connection to the cause.
See, and this goes back to my point about how I don't think these kids and these people really care about Palestine. It's just Palestine becomes a mechanism and a vehicle for their anti-West sentiments.
For sure.
So I don't think it's necessarily that all of these people would have to be ethnically Palestinian, or I mean, I guess that's not, Palestinian is not even an ethnicity, but anyways, they don't have to be from that region, or they don't have to be born in Palestine, but they can use this instance as a way to feel justified in attacking the Western world. Well, much like similar to BLM, I don't think many of that things actually really had to do with cop killings, because just like you were saying with the pointing out of what these slogans mean, like the whole BLM thing, they made it seem like on a daily basis cops are hunting down black people, when the FBI released reports where, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it was like right up leading up to the BLM stuff. There was 12 unarmed police killings of black men in the entire year. But then that obviously causes, so
But you got to think about that particular cause, though, was being supported by the government, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were 100%. They were behind them because it was their base. They let them protest through COVID, which I also think had something to do with it, because I think people had a lot of pent up aggression and energy from being locked down for so long. That's part of it, but also, the media was highlighting it as well, right? But this cause doesn't have a lot of support from government or from media. So again, it's to mobilize these things, you need a voice. And now social media is now being censored at scale as well. So I think there are things working against this getting to the same level, but I guess we'll find out.
But all right, moving on here to the second story of the day. We have got British Columbia reversing decriminalization of public drug use following an outcry from the public. So despite previously defending British Columbia's drug decriminalization pilot project, Premier David Eby has now decided to reverse course. The province has revoked the pilot project, prohibiting drug use in all public spaces such as hospitals, transit areas, and parks. However, possessing drugs in private spaces or at specific sites like overdose prevention centers remains non-criminalized. This change follows criticism from various figures, including mayors, politicians at both provincial and federal levels, and healthcare workers who raised concerns about safety in hospitals due to drug use by patients. The decision was also influenced by senior police officials' testimonies about the pilot project's lack of effective measures to uphold public safety. So is this a sign that we might, in some part, be exiting clown world?
I mean, I don't know if I would go that far, especially considering, like you said, BC's under NDP rule right now. I just think this was really, really clear, right? Like, they obviously had to claw back on this because of public outcry and public safety. So anyone with half a brain, which is the list I put most of these politicians on, it really wasn't rocket science to get this done. They understand that decriminalization in public spaces was not an effective strategy if they actually want to help. But the thing is, like, this program, along with the Safer Supply program, they've been a complete fail. I mean, BC has seen more people die from drug overdoses since decriminalization and Safer Supply came into place. And according to the BC government website, in 2024, they are on pace to again set a new benchmark, where roughly 8 people will die every day in BC from a drug overdose. This is wildly out of control. Like, this to me was them going, well, we want to do these things because it's all part of the liberal agenda, right? Which is exactly what this is. But we have to give something to the public because this is getting out of hand. If you remember, the hospitals, like, nurses were like, we don't even want to go to work. We have to condone this stuff. We have to help them get high. What are we talking about here? We need to stop this kind of ultra progressive approach where we focus solely on empathy and sort of enabling this bad behavior. And I think if we don't stop this approach in Canada, we're going to be looking at something like Los Angeles, who just declared a state of emergency on their transit systems, which they say is like a microcosm for all the stuff that's happening in that city due to drug overdoses, drug addiction rather, homelessness, and then just kind of mental illness. So I don't think we're getting off the clown world train. I think this has just become so blatantly obvious that the government had to do something because it was pretty clear that this is not an effective strategy and they were working against us.
Well, we've even just seen that Toronto is now proposing the same policies that BC is trying to revoke, right? And then even Ford kind of went, you got to be kidding me. What the hell is going on? These are nightmare policies. Wasn't it also, too, we just saw there was about a month or two ago, wasn't there an Eastern Ontario city that declared a state of emergency over opioid use?
Just look it up.
I believe it was in the Kingston area.
I don't remember, but that sounds correct. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, not even a little bit, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, Ontario City declaring state of emergency amid surge in overdose cases. Belleville. Yeah, okay, so it was over by Kingston.
Yeah, that's not too far away. A few hours east. So
we're already there, much like LA and stuff, saying like, hey, this is a emergency.
Yeah, but this is what I don't understand. If that's like, it's very clear that all the things we're doing are working against us. Like, look, if I'm being totally honest, I don't have a problem with decriminalizing drugs. I don't think people should be thrown in jail for doing. I don't. However, based on the way society operates today, it is a very ineffective strategy. It's just like you want to give people the opportunity to do these things without causing harm, but they just can't do it. And it's that whole, it kind of goes to like that whole pull up your socks and get it done. That used to be my attitude. That is my attitude for myself. My attitude is shut the fuck up and get it done and don't be a bitch. That's how I operate. Right? But the thing is, I've come to learn that I can't expect that from others. I can't tell people to pull up their socks because some people don't have the same capacity, ability, ambition, whatever it may be, right? But it's the same thing as this. If you decriminalize drugs, I'm not going to have a problem. But the rest of society, and I don't mean everybody, but a good portion of society, quite clearly, can't manage it. They can't pull up their socks and then have decriminalized drugs not be a problem for them, unfortunately.
And then you see the Canadian Institutes of Health and Research go a completely different way on this. This just shows you how utterly insane these institutions have become. So they published a report claiming that the 2.5 gram possession could be too low for addicts, noting that those living in rural communities would be unable to buy illegal drugs in bulk. So they need to, Yeah. So, well, their justification is that rural drug addicts don't have the same access to drug dealers, so we need to up the limit that we allow people to have possession of, so that these people can make less frequent trips to the city to get their drugs.
Your government is working against you.
Yeah.
This is so clear.
That's all you can take away from that.
Oh my God. So wild.
And then there is a perspective that I thought was interesting here on this front, where I was, and it was actually unrelated. They weren't even talking about the drug crisis, but this just kind of made everything click for me on what on this drug crisis. Is we've seen loneliness and like reports of loneliness skyrocket over the last decade. Right. Ironically, ever since the internet came about, with us being more and more connected, we simultaneously feel less and less connected in the real world. And so it was a psychologist, and what they were doing is they were talking about how the sense of loneliness isn't similar to other neuroses where it kind of just comes off like negative emotion, but loneliness actually has a physical response very similar to pain. And how this is why, and this is what I was kind of looking at, is like, okay, you look at what are a lot of these addicts' drugs of choice, opioids,
right,
which is the alleviation of pain. And I think that could largely end up being essentially the root of this entire essentially epidemic of drug overdoses, of more and more people feeling more and more isolated from the world. And this is actually a perspective that I I heard from Louis C.K. as well, where he was talking about, it's like, do you guys notice how the homeless are becoming more and more crazy? He's like, when I was growing up, I remember seeing the homeless, they were kind of just like out of the way, but they were there. But like now you drive down the street and they're like in front of cars and jumping in front of cars, and you're like, since when the hell have we got to this point? And what he was pointing out, and I think it was a great observation, is that nowadays people sit there and walk around in public, and we're always staring at our phones and all of this kind of stuff. And now these people don't even get eyesight from people. It's just like it's almost as if they are just don't exist. So they go so crazy with this isolation and loneliness that they're sitting there and just like jumping in front of people, being just essentially just being like, just fucking notice me. But it is like, it's kind of dark, but I mean, I look at this and just think, like, fuck, how do you get out of this? Because I mean, at the end of the day, I think technology is only going to take us more and more down that path of isolation and loneliness.
Yeah, so sort of to further your point there, there was a study done on rats a while back, and a guy did a TED talk about it, and it was really interesting. That's kind of why I remember it. So these rats, they were isolated and put in a cage, and they were given an option to drink water or water laced with cocaine. And when they were alone, they eventually drank enough water laced with cocaine to kill themselves. So then when they were put into a colony with a bunch of other rats, no one touched the drugs. So there's this innate human need or animalistic need to have connection, to not be lonely, to be around other people. And what this guy basically said, he was a recovering drug addict. And what he had said was, if humans don't have anything else to connect with, they will connect with drugs. So if we continue down this lonely epidemic path, this is what's going to continue to happen. And I believe our government knows this. I mean, this study was done ages ago. They're not idiots. And what they're doing is enabling that behavior by making it free and making it safe for you to continue down that path.
Yeah, I look at this like these drug policies are fuel on the fire. They are not going to solve the root issue at all by any means, even close. And it also, this kind of leads us into our next part. We've got the Global Affairs audit finding that 26% of federal contracts failed to comply with regulations. Global Affairs Canada conducted an audit that revealed significant issues in how they hired consultants. About a quarter of the contracts they looked at didn't follow the rules set out in the Financial Administration Act. Over the past 5 years, the department has signed over 8,000 contracts with consultants, totaling a whopping $567 million. Some of the problems include people making financial transactions without the proper authority, either because the contract was too high or because they didn't have the right authority for that specific type of transaction. The audit also found cases where the same person was handling both the financial transaction and the certification of it, which broke the rules set by the Treasury Board. There was also instances where contracts were signed after the services had already been completed, and in one case, someone who benefited from the contract was the one certifying it. In some cases, the auditors couldn't even find the signed contract, making it impossible to check if they even followed the rules. The audit also uncovered cases where large payments were divided into smaller ones to avoid competitive bidding requirements. This is only allowed in specific situations like emergencies or when secrecy is needed. Despite promises to reduce spending on consultants, the government's spending on them has actually been increasing. For example, they paid consulting firm KPMG nearly $700,000 for advice on how to save money. So, is this a case of ignorance or corruption?
This is 100% corruption, obviously, right? Like you said, it was around $567 million in contracts. So at 26%, that's 120 million taxpayer dollars that were basically handed out to friends and family via consulting contracts. This is complete bullshit. I mean, the government is an organized crime syndicate. That's all this is, right? Like I've been saying this for ages. The government is your modern day mafia. That's what it is. You know, they're obviously involved in corruption, bribery, and favoritism. Not only does this behavior undermine the integrity of our democratic institutions, which has clearly led to a lack of trust among citizens, but it also fosters this environment where people with influence and wealth realize that they can get what they want from our government for like they can leverage our government for personal gain, right? What that says to me is it's pay to play. So if I want to influence our government in any way, I just need to pay the mob and the job is done, right? But what's kind of funny here is that this erosion of sort of transparency and fairness, you know, not only does it damage the fabric of our society, but it also hinders equitable opportunity, which I love because this is the very thing these people claim to be fighting for.
There isn't even an attempt at accountability. So, for instance, when the GC Strategies, the company behind the Arrive Can scandal, who has received $256 million, I believe it was, since 2015 from the government, and this is a firm of 4 individuals with no employees, and they also contract out tech work they get paid for tech work by the government, but they have self-admittedly don't do the work they're being paid to do. So definitely corruption, especially in that scenario. But when they got brought in to testify, the guy got off the hook because he was claiming he had mental health issues, right? Well, I can't. Yeah, they were, and even the Liberals, the Liberal Party was helping him, being like, oh yeah, we can't cross-examine this guy. He's going through so much mentally.
Oh my God.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
I love it, but then they crack down on us via the CRA, right?
Yeah.
And they'll just completely bankrupt you, and they'll make those things, if it's HST or payroll, that goes personal. Then you have to go personal bankruptcy. These people don't care about you. This is insane. Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, there's actually been even studies and reports done on that show the IRS in specific, but I'm sure it is the exact same with the CRA, where they actually target low-income individuals more harshly for tax penalties, because when it comes to essentially going after people that have money, all of a sudden they have the ability to fight back.
They have
right?
the resources to say no.
Whereas if I just crack down on the lower income earners, and then also the lower echelon of the middle class people, they'll just roll over and pay me whatever I tell them to, because the legal fees are worse for them.
Oh yeah, you know what? I have my media company the other day, they reassessed me and said like, oh, you owe $900 for payroll tax extra. I'm like, I haven't had employees in that company for ages. I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to pay it because it's enough of a pain in the ass. So it's true though. Like, you'll just go, look, like how am I going to fight this? Now it's $900, not a huge deal, but like, it's significant enough that I'm like, this is bullshit. I didn't plan for this, but yeah, I don't even bother. I'm like, the hassle to even try to fight this. They could basically just add $1,000 to everybody. Everyone would go, oh, fuck, whatever, man.
Yeah. I got hit hard this year as well, and I can tell you that I'm gonna for sure just be like, hey, look, you'll get it when you get it, and I'm having serious mental health issues. For sure, I will just be claiming that I have mental health issues and be like, oh, I'll pay you back on my good days.
It's just tough because you see things like this, and you look at how the country operates, how the government operates, and you continue to vote for these people, and you continue to give them your tax dollars, and this is what they do. They continue to abuse it, and they don't have to take any accountability. And I just don't understand this anymore. Like, I understand it's a tough job. I get it. But if you follow all the rules and you don't breach conduct in any way, I can almost say, okay, well then maybe you shouldn't be accountable because it's a tough job. It's very integrated. There's a lot going on. I can almost let it. But when you're blatantly, breaching regulations to give money to your buddies, you know what I mean? And look at GC Strategies as a really good example. How is there no accountability in that space? And they're like, well, you can adjudicate this yourself and you can have a closed door hearing. It's all good. Don't worry about it. And your buddy's got mental health problems? Don't worry. $250 million? Forget about it. What are we doing? What's happening here?
I think we do. We need a fundamental overhaul, and I think we do need somebody like Malay to come in now at this point when this shit is just so bad. Did you actually see the president of El Salvador, what he did this week? So he pulled his entire executive branch into a spontaneous meeting and was like, hey, so yeah, just wanted to summon you all here to let you know today that you are all under investigation for corruption and taking bribes. We shall see how this plays out.
Wow.
I was like, that's what you need.
Yeah.
You need somebody at this point to come in and just say, hey, this microscope that I'm going to toss on corruption here is going to, like, everybody is in the sights.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, what he's doing over there, I forget his name, Bukele, if that's right.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I'm like,
there's a reason I said El Salvadorian president because I was like, I don't know.
I like what he's doing over there, and he's had some really good conversations on the global stage to say, hey, look, don't give me your liberal bullshit, your Western ideology crap, because that doesn't work over here. There is corruption, there is violence, there is a huge problem here. This guy's been voted in multiple times now, and I think he's doing a lot of good things for the country. And I just think, again, like, he's in a tough situation and the country's in a tough situation. And it's kind of like what we talk about with Malay and Argentina. Because the situation is more radical there, you need more radical reform. So yeah, I mean, I'm behind this guy in as much as I can be, considering my position over here in Canada.
All right, so the next story for the day we've got, Does the Empire Need to Fall? In H.G. Wells' book, A Short History of the World, he pondered why the Roman Empire flourished and then crumbled. He believed that its success stemmed from a strong sense of citizenship, which created unity, a sense of duty, and a willingness to make sacrifices for Rome. However, as the empire failed to communicate with and involve its growing population, it lost its sense of purpose and ultimately collapsed. Wells wrote, quote, "The sense of citizenship died of starvation. All empires, states, and human societies ultimately depend on understanding and will. The Roman Empire lost its will to exist, and so it ended." These words echo today in a column by David Ignitis discussing a Pentagon report on America's competitive position against a rising China. The report paints a grim picture of America's decline due to internal pressures like slowing productivity, an aging population, political polarization, and a corrupted information environment. Sound familiar, Canada? When citizens feel the status quo doesn't benefit them, they demand change. This sentiment isn't unique to the US, as many similarities are observed in Canada, with polls indicating broad dissatisfaction and a belief that Canada is quote-unquote broken. This discontent has led to Alberta's push for more autonomy, Saskatchewan challenging federal authority, and Quebec's resurgence in the separatist movement. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's leadership has exacerbated divisions rather than bridging them. His successor, Pierre, Poilievre, offers an alternative but also faces challenges in unifying the country. The lesson from history and current events is clear. A nation's prosperity depends on the will and unity of its citizens. Canada, like any other state, must confront its challenges with collective determination to rebuild what once was. So I don't think this is unique to just America or Canada, but rather shared by the entire Western world. So does this mean that the Western civilization as we know it is coming to an end?
I mean, it certainly seems that way. I'm optimistic. I really am an optimistic person, but you and I have our finger on the pulse, nationally and sort of globally with what we do, right? And so, while I do support the idea of unity and determination to rebuild, I'm pretty concerned that this mess is too big and that what might be best for Canadians is for the empire to fall. Now, what does that look like in 2024? Well, it's not the Roman Empire, so we don't cut people's heads off. So we can kind of scratch revolution off the list. If we're going to maintain order, I really don't think that's where we are at. I don't think that's how we're going to go about our business. Instead, what I think should happen, or would like to see happen, is the fall of several federal parties and the formation of new ones without deep-rooted partisanship. I believe that we need to decentralize power. I think that we need to rebuild these regulatory agencies that we've completely compromised. And I think we really need to find a way to remove as much money as possible from the political system. It's one of those things that people might argue, history tends to repeat itself. So they may say, hey, we're going to end up in the same place in, 100 years from now. But you know what, at least we can make the world a better place for a few generations. And now I know this is wishful thinking or idealistic, which I do give a lot of people shit for, but something in this country does have to change.
Again, I've always thought that history itself is very cyclical. There's no getting away from that. You can just make minor changes in those cycles to either alleviate the severity of the falls, and you can also bolster the improvements. But the idea that society and humanity and civilization progresses in a linear fashion, I don't believe in that at all. But we look at just where we are as a country, and I don't see any way that we can go on. At this point, it feels like we're just holding on for dear life while on life support, but that it's just a matter of time until that plug is pulled. We just saw as well that come out recently that Canada's global ranking is on lists that nobody wants to be on. So the Trudeau government's decision to increase the capital gains tax has become a major point of contention in the 2024 federal budget. What's not widely discussed is that Canada now has one of the highest capital tax rates globally. Economist Trevor Tome from the University of Calgary found that Canada now has the third highest top marginal capital gains tax rate globally, behind only Chile and Denmark. Prior to budget 2024, Canada ranked 14th on the list, with countries like Norway, France, Ireland, Israel, and the United States having higher rates. And this is just going to be a massive domino effect economically for Canada as well, because, so you've got the government taking more and more money out of the economy, which is already a bad thing. And then on top of that, you're going to have less and less investment into Canada because, look, your tax rates, they have to be competitive on the global stage. Otherwise, if somebody's looking at a place to invest their business or start a new corporation or, go forward with resource development, any of these things, they're not going to go do it in a country that is going to take 66% of their earnings. It's just not going to happen.
No chance.
So you're getting double screwed. The government's taking more and the private sector is going to give less.
Yeah, and just to quickly go through what other lists Canada has found itself on that, again, nobody wants to be on. Carbon tax. So we are second in the world right now for the amount of carbon tax or carbon revenue that the government's taking in, second only to France. But based on our 23% increase, we are poised to be number one in the world. But also an interesting fact, France and Canada combined collect more than 50% of all carbon tax in the world, which is just fucking bananas to me. Next on the list is medically assisted death. So it's interesting. They will argue that we are currently second on that list, but if you look at the figures, that's per capita. We are second to Netherlands per capita, but we were actually killing the most people via that MAID program. And what's alarming is that the compound annual growth rate,
yes, that's the most alarming,
is 30% a year over the last 5 years. So I'm of the mind, if that trend continues, that we'll be near to 20,000 people in 2024. And continuing with kind of being on the dark side there. Next to be drug overdoses, which we just talked about earlier. We're second only to the United States. And I don't think there's any chance we can catch them, at least not on a volume basis, maybe per capita. But again, we're second on this list. This is nuts. And then when you kind of change gears a little bit, look at population growth. Our population grew by 3.2% last year. That outpaced China, India, a lot of other places in the world that we shouldn't even be touching. And the thing is, we're going to continue at that rate for the next 2 or 3 years, according to the Liberal government, so it is what it is. And finally, and this is kind of a pain in the ass one for me, is housing affordability. We are currently second in housing affordability next to Portugal. But again, right now, homes in Canada are just under $700,000 on average. We are poised to see that increase, according to the CMHC, by 20% by 2026. However, Portugal is having their bubbles bursting a little bit right now, so they're kind of on their way down. So within the next 6 months to 2 years, Canada will be on top of that list as well. So of course the empire needs to fall.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unsustainable. And then, dude, just the irony of the people that are in charge right now, like Chrystia Freeland went on a tirade in the House of Commons the other day and justifying tax increases by quoting from a U.S. Supreme Court decision almost 100 years ago that, quote, taxes are what we pay for a civilized society, she quoted, who Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote in a 1927 decision. However, federal U.S. tax in 1927 was in the low single digits, according to the Tax Foundation, an American organization that focuses on tax policy, as opposed to Canada today, where the rate is anywhere from 15 to 33%. And then we've also seen the Fraser Institute came out with that report showing that actually, once you factor in everything, the effective tax rate for the average Canadian is much closer to 50%. And then so you contrast this to what Freeland said earlier this month, quote, today too many young Canadians feel that the deck is stacked against them. They can get a good job, they can work hard, but far too often the reward of a secure, prosperous, comfortable middle-class life is out of reach. When the finance minister tells you that after 8 years of Liberal policy, the deck is stacked against young people and a middle-class life beyond them, you might want to believe her because it is her government that put it out of reach. And now Freeland is pontificating about increased taxes paying for our civilization, the one where young people can't afford a home.
Yep, so they can keep giving out contracts to their buddies, right?
Yeah,
perfect.
And so also the American government that she's referencing at that time was Calvin Coolidge was in charge at that point. And what's interesting is he actually lowered the tax rates during his administration, but simultaneously ended up increasing the amount of tax revenue because, again, when you give people fair tax rates, they actually are more inclined to pay them.
Of course.
When you are having unfair tax rates, people will either start going into tax evasion or they'll just outright leave the country. And so for her, it just shows her ignorance to be quoting a time from America where they did almost the exact opposite of what she and her government are putting. And the title of that article that I was just reading from the National Post was "Chrystia Freeland vows to find the real killer of the middle class dream." And Dan, our buddy Dan, sent me a good meme reference from that where it was like, have you seen The Departed?
Yeah.
Where Matt Damon meets up with Jack Nicholson in the theater, and then he tells Jack Nicholson, he's like, they're doing a whole investigation to find the mole within this unit. He's like, can you believe it? They're hiring me to find myself. And I was like, that is the perfect reference to this.
That's great.
It's like, it's like, hey, it's you that's causing these issues. All right, and then we've also got the BC Conservatives bill for women-only sports being defeated by governing NDP. So proposed legislation by BC Conservatives to limit women's sports to biological females has been easily defeated by the governing New Democrats with support from Green and Independent members. Conservative Party leader John Rustad introduced the Fairness in Women's and Girls Sports Act on April 30th, saying it was the first of its kind in Canada. The bill would require that publicly funded sports and athletic teams, events, and tournaments be limited to biological females, Mr. Rustad said. The bill was defeated in a 51-27 vote, with the NDP, Greens, and 2 independents voting against it, despite it being customary for bills to receive unanimous support at first reading.
I mean, okay, so there's sort of two things to note here. This is clearly a liberal agenda that is do or die for these people, right? Like Biden just clawed back on Title IX, which even the ACLU complained about, saying that these changes would harm women far more than they would help. Biden also just implemented new rules for employers, forcing them to affirm an employee's preferred pronouns, which can change every day because they're made up. They also need to be able to provide, employers also need to be able to provide a washroom access that these transgender or gender, whatever, deem acceptable. This is fucking mental, right? None of this makes any sense. But what's crazy is that now the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission not only approved these guidelines, they now consider gender identity as a protected category against harassment, similar to sex, race, religion, or disability. But again, gender's made up. So the NDP are just towing this liberal line. It's do or die, right? So no matter what, they're going to continue to support this. And the second thing, sort of more to your point, the NDP is in serious danger of disappearing after this next election, right? Like with what Jagmeet did, kind of marrying Trudeau through this coalition, I'm of the mind that this party, there could be nothing left of them after the 2025 election, because they've gone so far left that what policy do they possibly have to implement that people will actually vote for anymore? Because again, like politics in Canadian are magnetized, right? So the Liberals have gone so far left, but the NDP has to stay left of them. Now they're like, you're already a self-proclaimed socialist. Next, you have to call yourself a communist. You don't have any other choice. So, I mean, they continue down this path, passing these policies.
Actually, they have to say they're communist because Stephen Guilbeault, part of the Liberal Party,
he's a socialist.
He said he's a socialist.
So, who's voting for them? Next time around, I don't think very many people. I think you're going to see the near elimination of this party.
I hope so, because this party has just gone completely off the rails. I find it very, it's almost unsettling how quickly we got here. We went from, I remember there was a famous, and I mean, Dennis Prager can be he can be a little bit obnoxious to listen to at times, but there was a good interview that highlights this from, I think it was like in 2018 or 2019. Dennis Prager was talking about how universities were putting tampons into men's bathrooms, and the whole Bill Maher panel just starts laughing at him. They're like, oh, what? Yeah, men can menstruate. Yeah, okay, laugh. Like you're an insane person caring about these things. But then you fast forward to where we are 6 years later, and we're now making it policy that men can compete in women's sports, and then you're also seen as bigoted if you think that women deserve their own sports leagues. Like, what? It feels like you're just in a washing machine and you don't know which way is up when shit is changing so fast.
Yeah.
You're just like, this is how is this the reality we now inhabit?
What's so weird to me, it's gone so far away from logic. And like you said, the goalposts keep moving. It's that washing thing. I don't know which way is up, but they still get like blind faith and support from these people. And I just don't even understand how more people are just kind of going, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense anymore. Actually, I should say, I think a lot of people are.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are, but it took a long time to get there, which is quite surprising.
You know, I was mentioning to you as well, there was a instance that happened in my personal life quite a few months ago where I had the LGBTQ, some community members at a place of employment that I was working at find my social media pages, and they caused absolute havoc in my life, and even started attacking people that were friends or actually even very close to me as well, and started to essentially put them through a Maoist style struggle session and making them try to disavow me and my views on LGBT stuff. But what I found interesting was after that person ended up distancing themselves from me, we recently chatted, and they told me that how surprised they were to find out how many people in secret agree with me. And I pointed it out to that point where it's like, yes, the vast majority of people think that this stuff is utter bullshit, but they are so afraid of the pushback and things like that happening where they will attack you. Like, these people are not nice people.
No, I agree. I mean, if you look at what happened to Riley Gaines when she was in, I forget what university it is, that's going to be annoying. I think it was in LA. I actually think it might have been in San Francisco. I don't even know why she went there. So she goes there and she does this speech at a college, and then she gets held hostage by this LGBT community, these people. Now, I don't want to shit on the community, but it's just these particular people that were sort of zealots about everything, right? So she's out there talking about, well, women should have their own sports leagues, which I think 99% of people agree with. So they lock her in there, right? And this is so stupid. So they're holding her ransom. In there, being held ransom with her were police officers. And the police officer, she goes, guys, fuck are we doing here? And the police officers go, look, sorry, Riley, we can only be an ally to these people in this community. So we literally can't do anything about it.
They said that?
Yes, exactly. They said I cannot believe that they. So you know what it was? To let her out, they each wanted $10, like fucking lunch money. Like, what are you guys doing? But to your point, violence. And what's insane is our institutions and our systems continue to support them. We condone it and we promote it, and we are their ally, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah, we need, I've said it before and I'll say it again. We need to just stop entertaining this bullshit. You can go be whatever you want to be on your own. You
Just
cannot...
leave kids alone and leave me out of it.
Yeah. All right. And our last story for the day, we've got Pierre Poilievre being booted from the House of Commons for calling Trudeau a wacko prime minister. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was kicked out of the House of Commons Tuesday after refusing to apologize for calling Prime Minister Justin Trudeau a series of unparliamentary words such as wacko and extremist. The drama began when Trudeau and Poilievre started trading barbs, the Prime Minister arguing that Poilievre was quote-unquote shamefully flirting with extremism when he was seen near the logo of far-right group Diagolon last week, and the Conservative clapping back at Trudeau's previous blackface pictures. But Conservative MP Rachel Thomas was the first MP to be expelled Tuesday when she called Fergus's handling of the House quote-unquote disgraceful and refused to withdraw and apologize for the comment. Quote, challenging the chair is against the rules of this House, he told Thomas, who reiterated that Fergus was acting in a disgraceful manner. Fergus expelled her shortly after, but the Conservative bench-clearing drama kicked up many notches when Poilievre called Prime Minister Justin Trudeau a wacko because his government has not yet approved the BC government's request to limit its decriminalization policy for illicit drugs. The unparliamentary language caused Fergus to jump to his feet and immediately reprimand the Conservative leader while the Conservative benches cheered their leader on. And then Poilievre tweeted, quote, today, the Liberal speaker censored me for describing Trudeau's hard drug policy as wacko. This is a wacko policy from a wacko PM that's destroying lives. Asked if Pierre was being censored by the Liberals, Immigration Minister Mark Miller said that Poilievre, quote, has never shut his mouth in his life and accused him of repeatedly saying dumb things and suggested it would be good if he shut up. So is Pierre right that he's being censored, or was this removal from the House justified?
I mean, this whole thing's kind of funny, right? It's all a bit useless. It's kind of theatrics. Should he been kicked out of the House? Like, I don't know the exact rules of the House, so I really can't answer that.
You're not allowed to use any defamatory language towards an individual in the House when addressing them in the House.
Well, then I guess, yeah. But I mean, again, the reprimand is a slap on the wrist. It doesn't mean anything, right? But he probably scored more points doing it than he lost. I'm totally cool with that. You know what? Honestly, it's good that he's saying these things in this sense. First of all, we know what he's doing right now is just trying to win a popularity contest against Trudeau. That's his mission right now, because it's not time to show people your policy. That comes down the road closer to the election, right? So when you think about how he's playing his game, I have to support it. But it is good that these things are coming out, because a lot of this stuff doesn't touch mainstream media. Most people don't know that Trudeau has not signed off on the BC decriminalization, which I don't even think he should have authority over. But people don't know that. They don't. So that's not going to get played in the media, or these other things that that the Liberals are doing that are affecting Canadians. If you don't highlight it in a way by adding some inflammatory touch to it, like he did here, it never gets out. So it's an interesting, in that sense, I can see some value in it. But again, I just think it's theatrics.
Yeah. And this does just go to kind of show that the entire House of Parliament thing really is just to your point, theatrics. But these rules are obviously dumb. Hey, sure, if these are the rules of Parliament and he broke them, and that means when you break the rules you get kicked out, then I don't think he's necessarily being censored. But at the end of the day, I think that is a really dumb rule. I mean, if you've got a prime minister who is actively running the country into the ground, who is promoting policies that are killing people, like we were just talking about earlier when it comes to these decriminalizations and stuff, then to me, it's just, what world do we live in when saying he is a wacko is considered more unparliamentary than his actions and policies and all of this kind of stuff? Like, I get it. You're supposed to operate in a gentlemanly manner and all this kind of stuff. But then this goes to something too. How then every single one of these liberals can sit there and say people like Poilievre runs in circles with white supremacists and misogynists and far-right groups and this and blah, blah, blah. Like, that is a way worse accusation against somebody's character than to call them a wacko.
Especially when they're a wacko.
Yeah.
Look, I think it's pretty clear that there are two sets of rules in society these days, right? And we've discussed it even with the communities that are supported by the current government. You know, with the LGBTQ in San Francisco, there are a set of rules for the liberals and there are a set of rules for the conservatives. That's just how it works, right? And it is several notches different, right? It is substantially, it's a significant difference. We just have to kind of understand what we're playing with here. It is strange though, because it's weird that we have to play into this sort of delusion, right? But if I have to see it as a positive, what I would say is the more this happens, the more people come to realize that this one party has basically protected themselves, but they're not the party anybody wants to support anymore. Mm-hmm. So the more it happens, I think the more support that they continue to lose. So at the end of the day, it's okay. But I mean, I agree with your perspective, actually. The whole system's broken. And this is such a funny little one to show like, oh, it's such a small cog in this machine. But it is interesting to show like, hey, look at Trudeau's track record and what he's done. And nothing happens to him. There's no accountability. But if the conservative leader calls him a wacko, it's kind of reasonable, you get kicked out of the house. So yeah, I mean, the system itself is broken. But again, I don't really feel that it's a censorship thing. I think it's just like you said, maybe just a bad rule.
All right. Anything else you wanted to add for today, brother?
That is everything.
All right. Before we get out of here, don't forget to head over to our website, blendrnews.com. That's BLENDR news.com to sign up for our newsletter, which goes out 6 days a week. And we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.